His work has helped define the visual language of some of the most iconic campaigns in Hollywood. He's also led over 100 campaigns across major studios and networks, building a career that sits right at the intersection of storytelling and design and cultural impact. Peter, welcome to Fully Managed.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, to begin, you have designed everything from album covers to film campaigns, completely different formats, but same goal, capture attention fast. So when you look at a piece of key art today, what's the first thing that tells you this is going to cut through versus this is probably going to get ignored?
That's a great question. It's also a process of like, am I looking at my own key art or my team's key art in progress, or am I looking at something out in the world? I've gotten pretty particular about my preferences and whatnot with key art, but I enjoy all kinds of styles and all kinds of genres and aesthetics and design languages and all of that. Doing what I do within the movie business, you get a lot of similarity and a lot of same, and you see campaigns that look like another campaign that looked like another campaign that, so for me, what really stands out is something that really looks unique. Even if it's not like necessarily the best design in the world, if it's something I've never seen before, I'm going to stop on that and spend more time with that and appreciate that more than, something that is a really well designed piece that looks like 15 other campaigns that you've seen over the last 10 years. So for me, it's really individuality and sort of uniqueness is a big stopping point for me, and that's what gets my attention, and that's what we strive for here as well. And I understand that the challenge with that is that you're working for oftentimes many people, and there's lots of cooks in the kitchen, and so I can design to my heart's desire, and usually we do that in the first round, but oftentimes there's like boundaries and guardrails, and it's like we have to show these characters, and if you show this character, you have to show this character, and so there's lots of limitations early on, and then you turn it loose to a conference room of 20 people, and they all have an opinion, and typically what wins out in a conversation like that is what people don't like rather than what they do like. And so what you find sometimes is the safest, most generic stuff that there's really nothing not to like about it. It kind of gets through that process sometimes, and so that's also why we see a lot of art out into the world that feels safe and recognizable and comfortable. And then if a movie does well, every other campaign for the next 2 or 3 years wants to look like that, So there's all kinds of things that, to all of our defense who do this, that make it more difficult to do something very unique and fresh and different that doesn't look familiar. And so when you get that through, I have to appreciate, and those of my friends and colleagues that do this, I think also appreciate that. Wow, that's gone through the ringer to get out into the world. And if you see a piece that is very unique and fresh, it's like, that's such a huge win. So that to me is kind of what stops me.
And like adding to this, key art has to distill an entire story into a single image. And I'm curious, what's something people consistently try to include that ends up weakening the idea?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the old kitchen sink, right? And it's that, again, going back to like client direction. If you take client direction literally, oftentimes you'll end up with a kitchen sink. And that's why you'll see a lot of posters out there, montage posters. And look, there are some amazing montage posters, like Star Wars sort of perfected that, 30, 40 years ago. And you get these great, assembly of images, and you get all the characters, and you get scenes, and you get like a landscape, and then typically the villain hovering behind them, and it works, and it's a formula. And that's like a very traditional, and usually for most of our bigger projects, we just have a bucket and it's just called montage, because you kind of have to represent that, and right away whether a client wants to see that or not. But I think that's the challenge, right? Especially when you work with, because a lot of our clients also do AV, and so they're familiar with the process of taking 2 hours of footage and a bunch of great music and cutting it down to a 15-second or a 30 or a 60 trailer, and you can do a lot with 30 seconds of imagery and a great song and great editing and great typography and graphics in a trailer. You've got so much to work with, right? And then for print, the challenge is you have one image, and you have to have a visual communication with one image, and it's a lot to ask for a single image to tell a whole story. And so where I get excited, and when I hear this from a client, I love to hear this. It's about creating a concept, and it's about creating something that evokes more of a feeling than tells a story necessarily. Sometimes you have an image that tells the story too, but really it's about provoking, and it's about an image. I look at like what I do is like akin to like logo designers, right? You've got somebody that's very like passionate about their product or brand, and they want to have a logo that represents everything that they put into the development and of that brand into a word sometimes, or a swoosh, or whatever that logo is. And the best, most timeless classic logos are the simplest logos that just give you a vibe, right? It doesn't tell a story. It just go, oh, that's cool. That looks fresh. That brand must be fresh and cool. So that's kind of what we do is try to create more of a feeling and try to provoke people more than explain to people what the film is about.
It all goes back to the feeling, I feel like it all comes back in creativity. It all goes back to, what feeling it evokes in you. Like I was just in my conversation, my past podcast conversation with an executive creative director. He was like, it all narrows down to what an idea makes you feel. And I'm curious, like a question just popped into my head. What is your favorite poster? Like what is the poster that invokes you like the most feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I've been asked that question 100 times, and I've probably given 99 different answers. I personally, I have some favorites that I've worked on, and favorites for very different reasons. And I've got favorites of posters that I've been a part of the process, whether creative directing or, just now with running the print team, I'm part of every process. So I get to celebrate all the great art that goes out into the world. And then I've seen posters out in the world that I have nothing to do with, and I'm like, oh, damn, that's good, And so, yeah, I pulled up some work that we've done just as a sort of a reference point. And I'll within the last, because we've been doing AV print now for 6.5 years, and put out a few hundred pieces in that time. And there are definitely some that stand out and are personal sort of passion projects. We're working on something right now, and I can't say a whole lot about it, but for the new season of House of the Dragon, and the key art's going to be epic. I'll just say that. So if you're a House of the Dragon fan, keep your eyes peeled, because that'll drop in the next probably 2-3 weeks. And it's very cool. And we won an award, a Clio award, for whatever the award is called, Best of Show, or it's not called Best of Show. It's called Grand Clio. And there was only 2 pieces. I think it was 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago. And it's the Tar poster. And it's not the most, it's like what I said earlier. It's not incredible design, but it's an incredible poster. And it's because we were working with the director, and the director was very particular about how he wanted to represent his film, and rightly so. It was an amazing film, and he gave us 80 images to work with. And he said, that's it. I don't want any stock photography. I don't want to use any frame grabs. We don't have any unit. We're not doing a photo shoot. He had hired a friend and photographer to sort of document the making of the film and take these amazing artistic photographs of the process. And then we got to use those to make the poster. So if you're familiar with the poster, it's just,
It's like her,
it's just a
like
simple, yeah.
it's skate band,
Yeah.
right? Just like something like.
It's very low angle. There's a couple posters out there, but the one that we designed it's very low angle. It's underneath her. She's got her arms stretched out like this, and it's just a single image. And I think the film was so powerful, but the poster was powerful in and of itself because it's just a single image that evokes a feeling and doesn't really tell any of the story. And yet it kind of is the story too. So when you get an opportunity to work with beautiful imagery and it clicks and you know that you've connected to this sort of the spirit of the film and the director's stoked and it gets recognition, all of that feels very satisfying, from my perspective. We did a poster called for a movie called The Crow. I didn't have much to do with the poster, but
the original one or the one that launched?
No, the latest one, and it's just a portrait of a dude, a profile of a dude, but the entire portrait is made up of crows, and it's remarkable. I mean, and that was one of those where I got to just witness that process. And when I saw that the first time before it was approved or whatever, and I saw it as a big printout, I just stopped in my tracks and I was like, oh my God, that's genius, and that not just coming from like, that it was coming from my shop, but it was kind of perfect. And it's a single image, but it's made up of about 600 crows.
Yeah.
Insane. And it is a perfect likeness of this character, and then I've got some oldies, and I mean, yeah, there's a lot of different answers to that question.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Well, so many different cool things have just been mentioned, but I think that the one that won the most was the House of the Dragon one. Like, I'm so excited to see. I'm going to be on the lookout to see what you mean because I am intrigued.
Yeah.
Like,
that
must have been so cool.
Yeah, it's been very cool. Like, this is season 3, and between this and House of the Dragon and A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, mm-hmm. which is a spinoff, I've worked on about a dozen of those campaigns because I worked on the very first Game of Thrones campaign and was part of that shoot. And,
oh my God, like in 2008?
What's that?
But that was must have been in 2008, right? Something.
Yeah, it was. And we were at the shoot, and I mean, we all knew the books were a big deal, but nobody knew how big a deal that series would be or if it would catch fire like the books did. And then I got to work on 5 or 6 seasons of Game of Thrones, and I've worked on every season of House of the Dragons, and we're working on our second season of Night of the Seven Kingdoms. So that whole franchise has sort of defined the whole second half of my career, which has been really fun.
Wow, that's so cool. I'm starstruck right now. And going to decision making and under pressure, in entertainment, there are always a lot of opinions, studios, producers, talent. How do you protect a strong idea when too many perspectives start pulling it in different directions?
Yeah. I mean, all we can do as producers of this art is put our best foot forward. And then you have to kind of let go. And that's the really interesting thing about this career and what we do is, we're in a lot of ways, we're artists, right? And a lot of the work that we do, we're essentially editors oftentimes, because very rarely do you have the luxury of working with a single image like the tar poster. Oftentimes you're taking multiple images and you're creating a scene and you're building worlds and you're kind of doing that. And so there's a lot of artistry and there's a lot of artistic sensibility in the process of what we do. But I tell young designers this all the time, we are in the service business, and we get to do art within the service business. We are not an art business that, by the way, services clients. It's very much the other way around. We are there to produce campaigns and art that the client feels represents their film the best. And we have the most control earliest in the process. And by the end of the process, sometimes we are able to push through the stuff that we believe in. We worked on the everything, everywhere, all at once campaign. Yeah. And that was really early on here. And we did several pieces of art for that. And that particular client was A24. The client's name was Graham, and he's a risk taker, and he pushes through art, that he believes in, and he likes to see things that have not been done before either. And so he signed off on some pieces. If you're familiar with that campaign, the first poster was it was literally about 6,000 googly eyes on a poster that just spelled out the name of the movie. And then we went out with the piece that I was super stoked about, that was a collaboration with the artist James Jean. And it's essentially a montage, but it's a remarkable montage that has all the elements and lots of it. And it's crazy, and it's literally everything on a poster. And then James, who is just an artistic genius, and he's done several movie campaigns, but we got to work with him, and that was like a bucket list thing. And the client signed off on it, immediately. And so sometimes you put something out there and it just gets through. And so you've been sort of able through cooperation and through communication and agreement with the client, you've been able to sort of get your vision across. And other times, by the time the art gets out into the world, it's almost unrecognizable from what you put out there to begin with, because it's gone through 89 rounds of revisions. And I'm not even exaggerating. Like, we've got 3 or 4 projects right now that we've done 100 or more rounds of revisions to get to, the final product. So the control thing it's sort of an illusion a little bit. I think, where the sweet spot is when you've worked with a client and you've sort of understood each other's design language, and you sort of have an unspoken communication and then you can kind of get there without a whole lot of, that's the best type of relationship to have. But it's harder and harder because, it used to be that marketing directors would have the final say, and sometimes they'd be the only voice in the conversation. So if they loved it, you were good. Now it's just the whole business has sort of changed. And while marketing directors still have a big voice in the conversation, oftentimes you have showrunners, and you have directors, and you have actors, and you have talent agents, and you have, 12 layers of, administration, even in the studio that you're working with, that has to go through. And somebody 4 rungs up the ladder might not have any context for how you got there, and they might just not like it. And so you back to square one, and that's why so the whole control thing is, you're lucky when you're able to control the process, but more often than not, that you're sharing control and having to give up control as the process goes on.
Oh my God, this conversation just keeps getting cooler. Like, I can't believe it. I mean, it's just so interesting for me because, by the way, I loved Everything Everywhere All at Once. It was a great movie, and it was a really cool poster. Like, I remember the one that's like red. I just remember it's red, and like it's everywhere all at once. And it's just so funny that you just see a poster and it's like, wow, it's so cool. And it like makes you want to go see the movie because it's like interesting and cool. But I don't know, like the process that goes beforehand. And it's just very interesting to be having these conversations and learning all that comes, to create that poster. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll have another conversation someday about AI, but AI is sort of changing that process drastically. And I think there's a lot of us who are trying to protect as much as we can the process of creation and communication and synergy between artists and between client and all of these things that are such a human thing, and art is very human and very feeling based, right? And AI is just kind of taking the world by storm and does things very quickly and very efficiently, but you lack all of the,
The
that
human
process.
element,
But
yeah.
well, the human element, the communication element, like, I started this conversation by saying what stops me in my tracks is seeing something I've never seen before. And by design, AI can't do that. Because it's what it's doing is it's regurgitating. And look, it's a great tool and it will be a great tool and it will change this business significantly in the end. But it it is replicating and sort of editing the best of all things, and you give it prompts and it's going, okay, here's 12 million pieces of information that I can hone into one image, but it's all based on things that have been done and are out in the world. It's literally by design doing that. So it inherently can't do anything genius level. It can be really good. It can look really good, but it's all based on things that have done before it. So there's, I think a lot of us old dogs that are doing this right now are always chasing that, doing something that nobody's seen before.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's cool. That's a cool perspective. And you've been doing this for almost 30 years across very different eras of media. I'm curious, what's a creative instinct that served you early on, but you had to let go of to stay like relevant?
Oh, it's a good question. I mean, going back to the control thing, I think, early on, I wanted to be an artist and I wanted, it, as I got more comfortable with the process of creating the art that I was doing and trusting my instincts and like allowing for inspiration to sort of flow through me, because I don't control any of that. Like when something happens and it feels right and it's, there's that magic that is not my brain figuring shit out. I think some people are really good at figuring stuff out and are very, rational in their design process and can create things that's not ever how I've worked. It's usually been an inspiration. I don't even know where it comes from. And, that's magic. And when I would experience that, then I would want, for sure, I'd be like, oh, that's it. That's it. And every now and then, like, a client would agree with me and I'd feel really good about that. But I think 9 out of 10 times that wouldn't necessarily happen. And so I had to sort of let go of the idea that I was right about something. And that's a tricky one, as you become more comfortable in your own skin and trust yourself. That's a huge like step in the career path of any artist, anyone actually, but especially in what we do. Like when you start believing in yourself enough that you just go, okay, I'm just going to follow my heart on this. That's you have to experience that to become a great designer, or we're just talking about what we do here, but then the client is usually not going to just agree with you. And so you have to let go of that and go, okay, well, I did what I felt was right, and I'm going to trust my instincts. I'm going to continue to trust my instincts, but I also have to trust the person that I'm working with and their instincts. And if they don't feel like my instincts are right, that doesn't make me wrong. It doesn't mean I have to change who I am and start designing differently in the future. It just means I have to let go in this moment and acknowledge the fact that there's another point of view here. And going back to the service industry, you have to kind of defer to the point of view of the person that's paying you and hiring you to do the work for them. So I don't know if that totally answers your question, but I think it was just letting go of, the sort of the pride and the possessiveness of the art, and allowing for there to be a process of, evolution that was not necessarily based totally on my initial inspiration or thought.
That's so cool. And I feel like there's a lot of emotional intelligence that's behind that take,
I mean, a lot of experience, a lot of learning the hard way, a lot of struggling, a lot of angst about like, oh, that client's making the wrong decision or whatever. And, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people that do this. Like if we could do a book of the best posters that never made it into the world, it would be the best poster book you would ever see. Like if you took the top 1,000 posters that died on the vine before they ever were seen by anybody, it would be genius. It would be an amazing, there's no poster book of posters that we've seen that could compete with that, you know? But it's like, you just have to know that. Like, I talk to young designers, like, you know, if you're a baseball player and you fail 70% of the time or succeed 30% of the time, you're going to be a Hall of Famer and make $20 million a year by failing 70% of the time, succeeding 30% of the time. If you're a quarterback and you complete half of your passes and half of your passes are not completed, you're going to the Hall of Fame, right? So there's failure in everything, right? And you have to learn and be able to allow yourself to fail and to learn those lessons you need from failure and be okay with failure as part of the process. But in our business, as an art director, if you fail 99% of the time, you're a very successful art director, which is crazy. Like if one of 100 of my comps ends up being a poster in the world, that's an amazing batting average. You know what I'm saying? So the process of failure is an essential part of what we do, and learning from that and breathing through it and not feeling like a failure is a failure. It's an opportunity, right? So that's a really interesting process of having to learn that, you know, and be okay with that.
Yeah, that's such a powerful perspective. I'm gonna make it my own. That's like a very good lesson for this Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, there's not very many industries where you could fail 99% of the time and be considered pretty good, you know. So
absolutely.
Yeah, but it's also it can be devastating too, you know. Like, so it's a bittersweet thing. And then when you do get something through and you realize how like the odds, how stacked the odds are against you, then it feels really great, you know.
I love that perspective, Peter. And people decide whether to watch something in like seconds, sometimes just from like a thumbnail. What do you think audiences respond to on a subconscious level that most teams overlook?
I mean, I assume that you're saying like a respond to like by seeing a visual.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think that question it's a fair question. I mean, if I'm being real and I took a step back from that question though, like, you know, there are times where House of the Dragon would be a perfect example. Put a lot of time and energy into that art when we're fortunate to have a client that feels very passionate about that and wants to have a piece of art every season. That's so rare. And we're so blessed to be able to have that partner in that process. But the truth is, like, you know, if you're a House of the Dragon fan, you know, if I put a square on the thing and it just said House of the Dragon and it was black, people would see that and watch it. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, sometimes I think in the marketing of what, you know, what we do, the visual, the print, the still image is an important aspect of it, but there's so many other aspects involved. And, you know, I like sometimes people will be like, if HBO puts it out, I'm going to watch it. Or if Steven Spielberg makes it, I'm going to watch it. Or if whomever is starring in it, Tom Cruise is starring in it, I'm going to watch it, you know, and regardless of what the poster or the trailer looks like, you know. So, and then like I work at a place that it was a trailer house first and I started the print team. And so I'm fortunate enough to be able to see oftentimes in the same campaign, the trailer and what goes out in that. And I just like, I'm in awe of what they do. And I'm like, damn, I see like a 30-second trailer. And I'm like, I want to see that film. Like, I just want to see it, you know? And trailers, I think, have a lot more potential sometimes to really sell you on a movie, but print has an opportunity to sell you on a feeling. right? And so again, I think it's just that if an image evokes a feeling, that's a really great,
Yeah,
place to start for a single image.
absolutely. And looking back at your career, was there a moment that didn't make sense at the time, but later became a turning point in how you approach your work?
Uh, yeah, lots of moments. That's a great question. I've never really thought about that before, but I mean, it started for me. Like, I don't know how I even got interested in this. Like, I was getting something printed at a print shop, and the printer shop had a back section, and there was a dude back there designing like restaurant menus. And he was just sitting back there on a computer, and this is back before computers were even commonplace. And I was just fascinated by this dude, and just making restaurant menus. I had no real, like, I'd graduated with like a marketing degree and had no real art background at all. And I saw this dude, I'm like, God, I want to ask if I can do an internship with him. And I went home and I told my wife this, and I was late 20s at the point, and probably should have defined my career like 5 or 6 years earlier, but like I had gone on a winding journey that included the Peace Corps and lots of other, interesting life things that had nothing to do with the career. And then when I saw this dude, I was like, and then long story short, my wife decided she wanted to go get her master's degree, and I went along with her. We were in a tiny little town. I was like, there was nothing to do. So I took a couple of design courses when I was there, and that was the beginning of it. And then I got kind of serious about it and applied to get a BFA in New York City at a school called FIT. And I was really stoked that I got in, and we moved down there. And for some odd reason, I was like, I just want to send my resume out to everybody, and maybe I could get a summer internship out of it. And I got hired by one of the coolest design shops ever. To this day, one of the cooler shops I've worked at. Like, and I've worked at some cool shops. It was just this little shop that did music and some movie stuff. And I don't know how I ever got hired there. I really, honestly, looking back at it, don't know how I ever got hired there, because I had nothing to speak of really, and no real book and whatever, and no experience. And then he hired me, and I just was like, I don't need to go to school. I'm going to just stay and work here, put all my eggs in that basket. And then the shop was a 3-person shop, and they lost 2 of their biggest clients. Simultaneously, my wife, we got pregnant with our first child. I got fired from this job, my very first job. And it was this amazing job. And my boss was like, he's like, I love having you here. We're probably going to have to either close down, or I'm just going to do this myself, because we didn't have enough clients at that point. And so looking back on that, I was like, God, how could this possibly be a good thing for my career? And yet it inspired us to move to Vermont, where we lived for like 5 years, and I was sort of able to develop my skills. And then we got stir crazy in Vermont, and so we moved to LA, and that whole process. And I lost the initial question you asked, but like there was lots of things that happened that were not planned or didn't seem like they were necessarily good things in the moment, but they turned out to be essential in the trajectory of my career.
I love it.
A lot of just sort of randomness and accidental and things that I could never have planned or rationally like prepared for.
Yeah, and they seem random, but I feel like in the end they're not. I mean, they were sort of divinely part of your path to take you where you are at today. So that's so cool. Thank you for sharing that.
For sure. I think we all have paths like that, right? Yeah. And I think it's if you can be open to that and go, well, this is not what I planned, but like this is what the universe has planned for me, and there's bigger things at work here than my brain, and if you can allow for that process to happen, it can be pretty magical.
Oh, yeah. Amen. I love that. I love that perspective. I share it too. And I think that this conversation has been so cool. Like I had never really understood or had a glimpse of this world. So thank you so much for taking the time today, Peter, to come and share your journey and your insights with us today.
Of course.
It truly has been a really interesting and just different conversation that I usually have. Very unique and original, I feel. And I always enjoy that. So thank you so much for taking the time of your. I must, what I can tell must be a very busy day. To speak with me, it really means a lot.
Oh, I appreciate you. It's been fun sharing some stories.
You've been listening to Fully Managed, brought to you by Penji. Check out the show notes to learn more about today's guest, and to learn more about Penji, the human-first creative subscription service, head over to penji.co. And by the way, if you're still listening, it would mean the absolute world to us if you were to share this podcast with a friend, and of course, subscribe.